I thought I knew my wife, Emily. For years together, every secret seemingly laid bare between us. We'd built a life, brick by trusting brick, or so I believed. We talked late into the night about everything, trips, a future house, even rocking chairs on a porch at 80. But the dream that truly cemented us was children. 2, maybe 3, she'd always said. Hours she'd spend on names, Emma, or maybe Alan. Her eyes would shine with a future I wholeheartedly envisioned. Nursery decor, gender-neutral, or soft blues and pinks, endless discussions. Her laptop held a bookmarked folder of tiny outfits and crib ideas. We'd lie in bed, laughing at ridiculous onesies, weaving our shared future aloud. That dream felt like the very mortar holding us together. So, soon after the wedding, we started seriously trying. Excited for this new chapter. Everything felt perfect. But months passed, nothing happened. I tried not to panic. Time, right? Still, a nagging feeling persisted. Eventually, we saw a doctor. I'll never forget that sterile room waiting. Emily's quick, nervous smile, a flicker of hope. Then the doctor came in. Shattered. My sperm count was too low. Exceptionally low. Minimal chances naturally. I sat there, numb, airless. I couldn't look at Emily. The doctor's voice droned, words lost. The drive home, silent. Back at the house, I finally spoke. I'm so sorry, Emily, the words catching. I just never thought it would be me. She squeezed my hand. It's not your fault, Nolan. This doesn't change how I feel. We'll figure this out. Her initial support meant everything. She held me as I cried, reassured me we didn't need children, we had each other, enough. But even then something felt off. Too quick, too final. One day, family Christmases with toddlers, the next, it had never been that important. Are you sure you're okay? I asked a week later. I know how much you wanted this. I'm fine, too quickly. Maybe we were rushing. Maybe it's better this way, just you and me. Calm words, kind even. But a flicker of distance in her eyes. A quiet closing of a door we'd both held open. And then the baby conversation stopped. No names, no nursery ideas. Like it never happened. If I tried, she'd change the topic. Then other things. She started treating me differently. Slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Little remarks, seemingly insignificant at first. Maybe join a gym? For your health. Emily said one night. My health? Salad for lunch. A tight smile. Just, you used to be more active. Not just that once. Little things accumulated. Comments about my time, the house, appointments, things she'd mentioned weeks ago. Not arguments, just quiet jabs, unlike her. We hadn't used to talk like this. And yeah, okay, a few pounds. Not great shape, but not letting go either. Still, she seemed to search for fault to justify this shift, this unspoken change. One evening I finally asked. Couldn't pretend anymore. Emily, what's going on? Distant. Cold. These comments, it doesn't feel like you. She didn't look up. What? I'm just saying things. No, I pressed. More than that. This sudden change, like I can't do anything right. Blaming me for something I don't know. She put her phone down. Nolan, too sensitive. Reading too much. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. I knew her. Knew when something was wrong. The way she looked at me like I was the one who had moved on. Not cruel, just colder. Detached from our planned life without telling me. Yet, with time, I started to believe her. Maybe I was too sensitive, reading too much. Didn't want to be needy, pushed too hard. So, I let it go. Stopped bringing it up. Years ticked by, routine like dust. Living together, same bed, same table, like roommates. I tried again, about adoption, surrogacy. We could still have a family, Emily. No pause. I don't want to think about it. Can't we just be happy? But do you mean that? Looking in her eyes. Happy as long as we're together, almost mechanical, but I never believed it. Convincing herself more than me. Then, out of the blue, a trip with friends to America. Unusual. Weekend getaways before, but this. I trusted her. Years of trust. I'll help you pack, I said. Chargers, toiletries, books. She smiled, kissed my cheek. Airport morning, still dark. Quiet car ride, traffic talk, landing time. At drop-off, a tight hug. Thanks for understanding, she said, looking in my eyes. It felt a little odd then. I wasn't doing anything special. Supportive before, but this felt different, sincere. So, I let it go. White heavy check mark 2, part 2, 5,000. That night, sleep was a distant luxury. The urge to call Emily pulsed relentlessly, a need to confirm her safe arrival. 9 hours her flight was slated for. I filled the void with television's flickering images, the endless scroll of my phone, half-hearted attention to the screen, each half hour marked by a glance at the clock. Finally, the flight tracker illuminated the word, landed. My fingers flew across the screen, dialing her number. Ring after unanswered ring. Exhaustion, I reasoned. Phone off, straight to the hotel, asleep before her head hit the pillow. Travel's brutal toll? But morning painted the sky, and still silence. A knot of unease cinched tighter in my gut. Another call. Still nothing. Texts followed, unanswered pleas in digital form. Hey, just checking in. Hope you landed okay. Then, a more urgent one. Call me when you wake up. Starting to worry. Hours bled into the day, each silent tick amplifying my anxiety. Panic, a cold wave, began to crest. Focus fractured, my mind a relentless projector of worst-case scenarios. An incident at the airport? An accident on the tarmac? A frustrating delay? I plunged into news websites, a frantic search for any flicker of information, any clue. Finally, desperation propelled me to call her sister. Hey, I managed, striving for a casual tone that belied the tremor in my voice. Have you heard from Emily? Landed last night, haven't been able to reach her. A pause stretched, thick with unspoken concern. No, her sister replied slowly. Haven't heard anything. Isn't she with her friends? Yeah, that's what she said. My throat tightened, a physical manifestation of my growing fear. Maybe you could check with them? The words felt weak, a desperate grasp at straws. So I called Tanya, a close friend, the usual architect of their girls' getaways. Hey Tanya, I began, my voice betraying my forced nonchalance. Sorry to bother you, but have you heard from Emily? She told me you all were going to America. Wait, what? Tanya's interruption was sharp, laced with confusion. America? No. She said you two were going together. A beat of stunned silence hung in the air. Then Tanya's voice shifted, a note of dawning realization creeping in. Actually, she continued, her tone now edged with concern, I'm about 2 blocks from your place right now. Having coffee with Hannah. We're not on any trip. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. My mouth went dry, the taste of disbelief bitter on my tongue. A mumbled, okay, thanks. Talk to you later, escaped my lips, but the mechanics of ending the call remained a blur. I stood frozen in the kitchen's sterile light, the phone suddenly heavy, a leaden weight in my hand. In that instant, the scattered fragments of the past weeks clicked into a horrifying mosaic. There had been no trip with friends. No flight across the ocean. Just a carefully constructed lie delivered with a chillingly straight face. She had allowed me to participate in the charade, helping her pack, driving her to the airport, offering hollow reassurances. She had looked me in the eyes, thanked me for my understanding, as if I were an accomplice in her deceit. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, the vibrant colors of the living room suddenly muted, the familiar space alien. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, yet my hands felt strangely numb, disconnected. Why? The silent question echoed in the sudden emptiness of the apartment. Why the elaborate fabrication? A desperate attempt to cling to a semblance of normalcy warred with the cold, hard truth of her betrayal. I tried to conjure alternative explanations, flimsy constructs of missed connections and dead batteries, desperate to avoid the crushing weight of reality. But deep down, a cold certainty settled. This had been planned. The trip, the story, the goodbye, a meticulously crafted exit strategy, and I had played the unwitting fool. A wave of nausea washed over me, the realization that I was living in a nightmare, one from which there seemed no waking. This wasn't the woman I had pledged my life to. It was as if a familiar face had been replaced by a chillingly perfect imitation, a stranger inhabiting the shell of my wife. And I, blinded by trust and a desperate desire to ignore the growing cracks, hadn't seen it coming. But now, the pieces, sharp and jagged, began to align. The subtle shifts in her behavior, the increasing coldness, the abrupt cessation of future plans, even those seemingly innocuous jabs about my appearance, they all coalesced into a damning picture. She had been withdrawing, slowly severing the ties that bound us, and I, in my denial, had allowed it to happen. That night, the phone remained clutched in my hand, a silent vigil for a call that would never come, a desperate hope for an explanation that would never be offered. Sleep remained a cruel illusion, my mind a relentless loop of unanswered questions and the bitter taste of betrayal. Waking the next morning felt like surfacing from a deep, troubled sea. The muted light filtering through the blinds cast the bedroom in shades of gray, mirroring the landscape of my emotions. For a fleeting instant, a sliver of denial flickered. Perhaps it had all been a terrible dream, a phantom born of exhaustion and worry. But then my gaze drifted to the other side of the bed, the stark expanse of empty sheets, a brutal testament to reality. She was gone. The finality of it hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing my breath. All the desperate justifications I had clung to in the darkness of the night, a missed flight, a dead phone battery, an unforeseen emergency, crumbled into dust in the face of this undeniable emptiness. She had planned this. She had wanted to leave. The initial days dissolved into a disorienting fog of disbelief and a desperate, futile hope. My fingers, acting independently of reason, repeatedly dialed her number, each unanswered ring a fresh stab of pain. Voicemails accumulated, rambling, incoherent pleas for understanding, for any sign of life, any explanation. Sometimes I would simply breathe into the receiver, the silence on the other end a crushing weight, before hanging up, defeated. Other times a fragile semblance of normalcy would surface, a forced casualness in my tone. Hey, just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. But beneath the veneer, a raw desperation festered. Please, Emily, please just talk to me. I don't understand. I need to know what's happening. The only constant was the silence, a vast, echoing void where her voice used to be. And in that silence, a profound sense of erasure took root. It felt as though I had been meticulously excised from her life, my existence rendered insignificant, our shared history reduced to nothing. Her family, initially, mirrored my shock and confusion. Her mother's tearful bewilderment offered a small measure of solace, a shared pain in the face of the inexplicable. Are you sure she didn't say anything, Nolan? Any hint at all? Her mother's repeated headshakes, her eyes clouded with worry, only amplified the mystery. I became a frequent, unwelcome visitor to their home, a silent specter haunting their familiar spaces, searching for answers in the echoes of her past. What was I even looking for? A discarded note? A slip of the tongue? Some overlooked sign that would unravel the enigma of her departure? Her mother, in her quiet grief, offered what comfort she could, a warm meal I couldn't stomach, a sympathetic ear for my disjointed ramblings about Emily's quirks and habits, desperate attempts to reconstruct the woman I thought I knew. Days blurred into weeks, each sunrise a stark reminder of her absence. Sleep became a battlefield of restless thoughts and vivid, painful memories. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every shared moment, searching for the elusive crack in the foundation of our marriage, the precise instant when everything had begun to crumble. What did I do wrong? The question became a relentless mantra, a self-inflicted wound that refused to heal. Had I been blind? Had I been deaf to the subtle shifts in her demeanor? Had I simply not been enough? Hours were lost staring at the ceiling, dissecting the minutiae of our life together, desperate to find a logical explanation for the illogical act of her abandonment. My professional life, once a source of stability, began to unravel. Lateness became a habit, deadlines blurred, and the thread of coherent thought often snapped mid-sentence. Concerned glances from colleagues morphed into direct inquiries, a gentle probing into my increasingly evident distress. Are you okay, Nolan? The standard reply, a mumbled personal stuff, became a shield against the raw vulnerability of the truth. The shame of it, the public admission of being so easily discarded, felt unbearable. Eventually, the weight of my isolation became too heavy to bear, and I confided in a few close friends. Their support, though well-intentioned, felt distant, a comforting hand reaching across a chasm of incomprehension. Drinks, game nights, a forced attempt at a concert, their efforts to pull me back into the world felt like a pantomime of normalcy in the face of my profound loss. Even amidst their laughter, her absence was a tangible presence, a constant ache in my chest. Where was she? Was she happy? Had she found what she was looking for? And the most insidious question of all, why hadn't I been enough to make her stay? The casual inquiries from those unaware of my shattered reality were the sharpest cuts. Neighbors, distant relatives, old acquaintances, their innocent "how's married life?" or "how's Emily doing?" felt like a cruel twist of the knife. The effort of fabricating a smile, of uttering the hollow lie, "Oh, she's good. We're good," became an increasingly exhausting performance, each repetition burying me deeper under the weight of my deception. The charade couldn't last. The sleepless nights, the gnawing emptiness, the inability to function, it all culminated in a reluctant admission: I needed help. The decision to seek therapy felt like a profound act of surrender, a tacit acknowledgement of my own brokenness. Sitting in that sterile office, facing a stranger who held no preconceived notions of my life, felt strangely liberating. I began to unravel the tangled threads of my grief, the anger, the betrayal, the deafening silence she had left in her wake. Each session was a slow, painful excavation of the past, a desperate attempt to understand the present, and perhaps glimpse a path toward a future I could no longer envision. My therapist listened patiently, offering no easy answers but a steady presence in the storm of my emotions. And slowly, tentatively, the first fragile seeds of healing began to take root in the barren landscape of my heart. Therapy became a weekly ritual, a dedicated space to unpack the wreckage of my life. I recounted the sleepless nights, the endless replays of our shared history, the desperate search for a moment, a sign that would explain her departure. My therapist listened with a quiet intensity, offering observations that slowly began to chip away at the wall of self-blame I had erected. "Nolan," she said gently one afternoon, "you can dissect every moment, search for every perceived flaw, but you cannot control another person's choices. Her leaving was her decision, not a reflection of your worth." It was a difficult truth to internalize, a concept that warred with the ingrained belief that I had somehow failed. For so long, I had been convinced that I was the variable, the reason for her unhappiness, the catalyst for her leaving. If only I had been more attentive, more exciting, more something, she would have stayed. But gradually, a different narrative began to emerge, pieced together from the fragments of my memories and my therapist's insightful questions. The coldness, the subtle criticisms, the withdrawal, these weren't sudden shifts. They had been a slow erosion, a gradual detachment that I had consciously or unconsciously ignored. I had clung to the illusion of our shared happiness, desperately trying to mend cracks I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. The realization that my efforts alone couldn't sustain a one-sided relationship was a painful but necessary step towards healing. With the slow thawing of my emotional numbness came a tentative re-engagement with life. Small acts of self-care, once neglected, became small victories. A walk in the park, the preparation of a simple meal, the turning of pages in a forgotten book, these mundane activities felt like reclaiming small pieces of myself. I had lost so much of my individual identity within the confines of our marriage, my world having shrunk to the parameters of us. Now, the vast expanse of me felt both daunting and strangely liberating. I revisited old hobbies, passions that had lain dormant beneath the weight of shared life. The gym, once a chore, became a release. Books, dusty on the shelves, offered new worlds to explore. Even the simple act of cooking, the creation of something tangible with my own hands, brought a small measure of satisfaction. My professional life, too, began to reflect the slow resurgence. The fog of grief that had clouded my focus began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Work, once a mere obligation, became a source of accomplishment, a tangible measure of my progress. The promotion felt like a validation, not just of my professional capabilities, but of my resilience. It was a victory earned solely by my own efforts, a stark contrast to the shared endeavors of my married life. Yet, the healing process wasn't linear. Unexpected triggers lurked in the mundane details of my surroundings, a familiar song on the radio, a shared photograph tucked away in a drawer, the scent of her favorite perfume lingering on an old scarf. These sensory reminders would momentarily derail my progress, reopening old wounds, prompting the familiar, unanswered questions. What was she doing? Was she happy? Did she ever think of me? But the duration and intensity of these moments began to lessen. The memories, though still present, no longer held the same power to paralyze me. I was learning to acknowledge the pain without succumbing to it. Slowly, tentatively, I began to rebuild the connections with friends I had inadvertently neglected during my marriage. The easy camaraderie, the shared laughter, the simple act of being seen and accepted for who I was, independent of us, felt like a lifeline. They reminded me of the person I had been before Emily, a person I had almost forgotten. Looking back, I recognized the imbalance in our relationship. I had been the constant gardener, diligently tending to the fragile ecosystem of us, often at the expense of my own needs. Her leaving had felt like a catastrophic uprooting, leaving me adrift and incomplete. But I was beginning to understand that wholeness came from within, not from another person. The process of finding my way back to myself was slow, arduous, and often painful, but with each small step, I felt a flicker of the man I used to be, a man capable of standing on his own. By the time the first anniversary of her departure arrived, I could look in the mirror and see a different reflection. Not a man defined by betrayal, not a man mired in the past, but a survivor, scarred but stronger. The legal proceedings for the divorce were a formality, a final severing of ties to a life that no longer existed. With the stroke of a judge's pen, I was officially free. A sense of quiet liberation settled over me, a feeling of finally being able to chart my own course, unburdened by the ghost of us. And in that newfound freedom, a quiet pride began to bloom. I had navigated the unimaginable, and I had emerged, not unscathed, but whole. Life began to settle into a new rhythm, a solo melody that, while different, held its own quiet beauty. The days passed with a semblance of normalcy, punctuated by the comforting routines I had painstakingly established. My friends filled the empty spaces, work provided a sense of purpose, and the constant ache of her absence began to recede, replaced by a quiet acceptance of what was. The moments of sharp, unexpected pain still surfaced, triggered by a familiar scent or a fleeting memory, but they no longer held the power to derail me. I was learning to live again, not in the shadow of what was lost, but in the light of what remained. And then, one ordinary Saturday morning, the past returned, uninvited and holding a baby. The sight of Emily standing on my doorstep, a baby cradled in her arms, was like a glitch in the fabric of my newly reconstructed reality. My mind, for a disorienting moment, simply refused to process the image. It was her, yet not quite, a subtle weariness etched around her eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. But it was undeniably Emily holding a child that was undeniably not mine. She looked at me with an unsettling blend of apprehension and what seemed like genuine hope, as if her unexpected arrival with this infant was a perfectly reasonable occurrence. A wave of disbelief washed over me, a stark contrast to the quiet acceptance I had painstakingly cultivated. I had moved on, rebuilt, found a fragile equilibrium, and here she was, a living, breathing disruption. The carefully constructed walls around my heart felt like they were beginning to tremble. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken history and the undeniable presence of the child. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a low, unsteady murmur. "Emily?" She offered a tentative smile, a ghost of the carefree joy I once knew. "Hi, Nolan." The casual greeting, after a year of silence and the seismic shift in our lives, felt surreal, almost insulting. Then, without preamble, without a hint of the turmoil her presence had ignited within me, she asked, "Can I come in?" The audacity of the request almost made me laugh, a bitter, humorless sound that caught in my throat. After everything, after the lies and the abandonment, she simply expected to waltz back into my life, baby in tow, as if we could pick up where we left off. But the man standing before her was not the same one she had walked away from. I had rebuilt this space, this life, on my own terms, and I would not allow her to contaminate it with the wreckage of her choices. "No," I said, my voice gaining a firmness I hadn't realized I possessed. "Stay there and explain." My threshold, both literal and metaphorical, would not be crossed so easily. A flicker of surprise, perhaps even hurt, registered on her face, but she remained rooted to the spot. This time she listened. And then the carefully rehearsed words began to flow. "I know this is a shock," she started, shifting the baby in her arms. "But I wanted to come back to explain everything." Her eyes, when they met mine, held a plea for understanding, a desperate hope for absolution. It was as if she genuinely believed that a few well-chosen sentences could erase the pain, the silence, the betrayal. For a fleeting moment, the old Nolan, the one who had loved her unconditionally, wavered. But the image of the empty bed, the countless sleepless nights, the slow, arduous journey back to myself solidified my resolve. I would not open that door, not to her, not to the chaos she carried with her. She spoke of mistakes, of regret, of realizing what she had lost. The words felt hollow, rehearsed. Motherhood, she claimed, had brought a new perspective, a sudden clarity about what truly mattered. Apparently, what truly mattered was showing up unannounced on my doorstep after a year's absence, a baby in tow. She gazed down at the child, then back at me, a soft, almost naive hope in her eyes. "This is our second chance, Nolan," she said, as if it were an undeniable truth. "My second chance?" I echoed, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. As if this child, a tangible reminder of her infidelity, was some kind of magical reset button. As if we could simply erase the past year, the pain, the rebuilding. "I know I hurt you," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But we can fix this. We can be a family. You, me, and her." The word family felt like a cruel mockery. I stared at the infant, an innocent bystander in this messy drama, and felt nothing but a cold, hard resolve. Finally, the question I had held captive for so long escaped my lips, raw and laced with years of pain. "Why did you leave, Emily?" Her gaze dropped, as if the cracked concrete of my walkway held some profound secret. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with the weight of our broken history. "I need to hear it from you," I pressed, my voice softer now, but firm. "No more guessing games. Just tell me the truth." A slow, ragged exhale escaped her lips. Then, the words that shattered the last vestiges of the woman I thought I knew. "I wanted a child, Nolan. And you couldn't give me one. So, I found someone who could." The words hung in the air, cold and clinical, devoid of any genuine remorse. She didn't even meet my eyes. My heart clenched, but the icy grip of anger tightened around it, preventing it from breaking. She continued, oblivious to the devastation her words had wrought. "He didn't stay," she added, a fleeting glance at the baby. "I thought he would, but he left. And when she was born, I realized I wanted you back." The audacity of it stole my breath. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice dangerously low and steady. "You left me because I couldn't give you a child. You found someone else, had his baby, and now you're here, expecting me to welcome you back, to embrace this situation?" Tears finally welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Nolan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't know what I was doing. I made a terrible mistake. But her tears held no power over me. I had shed enough tears in the lonely darkness of her absence to fill an ocean. She pressed on as if words could somehow rewrite the past. I know now, Nolan. I know you're who I truly loved. I was lost, confused. I didn't realize what I was giving up until it was too late. We're meant to be together. Meant to be? The words echoed in the sterile morning air, a cruel twist of fate. Then came the guilt trip, the attempt to paint herself as the victim. You don't know how hard it's been, she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Being a single mother, it's not easy. I've been through so much. All alone. She clutched the baby tighter, a silent appeal for sympathy. I've been through hell, she choked out as if her self-inflicted pain somehow negated the year of silent agony she had put me through. She stood there, on my doorstep, expecting understanding, expecting forgiveness, expecting me to simply erase the past and welcome her back into my life, into my home, into my heart. The sheer entitlement of it was staggering. I need your support, Nolan, she pleaded, her voice trembling. I'm ready to make it work this time. But the man she was speaking to was no longer the man who would blindly offer his heart for her to break again. The silence that stretched between us was my answer, a final, resolute closing of a door that should have remained shut a long time ago. You made your choice, Emily, I said, my voice firm, devoid of any trace of the love I once felt. Now you have to live with it. There is no second chance here. The shock on her face was almost comical, a stark illustration of her unwavering belief in her own narrative. She truly believed she could simply return and rewrite our story. But some stories, once finished, cannot be reopened. And ours, irrevocably, was over.